Welcome to Inside Marketing with MarketSurge, your front row seat to the boldest ideas and smartest strategies in the marketing game. Your host is Reed Hansen, Chief Growth Officer at MarketSurge.
Hello and welcome back to the Inside Marketing with MarketSurge podcast. Today I'm joined by Matt and Andrew, who are the co-founders and voices behind Digital After Dark, a flagship podcast born from their late night conversations about digital analytics, data strategy, and emerging tech trends. What began as two friends sharing war stories in an ever-evolving digital landscape has blossomed into a vibrant community of practitioners, analysts, and storytellers, where guests and listeners alike come to debate concepts, swap best practices, and stay ahead of the curve. Matt and Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And it's been nice to get to know you over recent weeks. I had a great time on your podcast. The banter's fantastic. And I understand that you have a sponsor. Give you a chance to chime in if you'd like.
It's a running joke because I normally, because it's Digital After Dark, we're based in the UK. So it's 10 p.m. Our time, and that's generally when we do it. So I'm normally having a beer by that point. Andrew doesn't drink, so he's never having a beer. But today I'm on the non-alcoholic beers. So Beck's Zero is our unofficial sponsor for today.
I love that tradition. I need to start. Earlier I was sponsored by Dr. Pepper Strawberries and Cream Zero, which was disgusting.
I like the Pepsi Max cream soda and cherry cream soda ones that they've just got them in the UK. I don't know whether they have them.
I'll have to look for them. I haven't seen it yet. Is Max the same as Zero?
Yeah, it's the zero sugar, but they're nice. I think they're nicer than the just the straight Pepsi Max Zero. I like the cream soda flavor. It's nice.
Yeah, I've been going on more of a health trend, so I've been doing more vitamin tablets in my water. So
okay. Well,
try to keep healthy.
Yeah, I've got one healthy guy here. How did the After Dark podcast come to be? Digital After Dark is the title. How did you make these discussions turn into a podcast? What was kind of the inception of all that?
Well, for me, I've always wanted to do a podcast. I've been wanting to do it for quite some time, but just needing to find the right co-host. So I think it was just last year, I got invited to go to the Analytic Rockstar in Las Vegas for the Adobe Summit. And unfortunately, I was unable to go. But I asked Matt if he wanted to go in my place. And part of the gifts that the presenters got was an entire podcast setup to be able to keep the good work going. After hearing that, I was like, well, Matt, do you want to start a podcast?
Yeah, we kind of had to do it by that point. I think for me as well, it comes from a few different places. The most obvious place was Andrew and I at the start of 2024, so quite a while ago now, or maybe even at the start of 2023, made a New Year's resolution to try to put more content out on LinkedIn and to generate a bit of interest and just to kind of share expertise and things that we've learned. We work with a lot of different clients and come across a lot of different setups and interesting. We work with lots of different vendor tools. We come up with lots of different interesting things within given parameters of interest, given the field that we work in, interesting to us and our listener. That was one thing. We were starting to put more content out, and then the Adobe thing happened, and we were like, why don't we do a podcast? For me as well, I've got a young family. I spend most of my time looking after them and don't really get to do a lot of self-expression. I didn't manage to keep up really putting the content on LinkedIn because I'm putting my kids to bed and things like that. And so this was one opportunity to just still be able to kind of keep something semi-regular where I do something that is of interest and is a bit of a hobby to me, whereas I don't really get to do that most of the time.
Well, that's great.
And I think I kept that New Year's.
Go ahead, Andrew.
I was going to say, I think I kept that New Year's resolution going for a while. So I think I kept it for 4 months doing daily content out on LinkedIn. And it did really work for a while.
You did a lot better.
But I couldn't keep it going either. After a while, you just sit down at a computer, like, you know what, I'm sitting down at a computer all day. Do I really want to sit down at a computer to type some more?
This is why I'm standing up at a computer right now.
No, that's smart. And I for my audience that hasn't maybe heard your podcast yet, I would definitely recommend they tune in Digital After Dark. And Matt and Andrew actually do a great job making this fun and interesting. They're funny guys themselves, and just I really enjoy their banter. Now, tell me a little bit about maybe your work, outside of podcasting. What are your specific fields of expertise? And then I'd like to dive into that and how small and medium-sized business owners and marketers can do more with data, more with analytics. And I'll take you there, but I'd love to hear more about what you do in your day jobs.
Do you want to go first, Andrew?
I could go first. So I'm actually part of Matt's team at Loop Horizon, where we are focusing on the implementation and usage of digital analytics and how to get the most out of your investment. One of the things that we always talk about was it's not just about collecting the data, but it's about how do you use it and leverage it, even in an automated way, to be able to turn yourself from a cost center to a revenue generating center. So my field is more around the implementation and the collection of digital data. That may be using Adobe Analytics, it could be using Google Analytics, Decibel, Content Square. Essentially, if it's a tool that can go on and understand how people are using websites, from collecting data to marketing pixels, then I'll be getting involved in it and digging into it and understanding how it works.
Yeah, and Matt?
Very similar. I've been really keen for, and this is my thinking phase where I'm looking up away from the camera. I've been really keen for probably the last 10 years, I think it's safe to say, in exactly what Andrew mentioned around turning digital analytics. There's a perception in the market that digital data collection is just reporting and some analysis, and it may inform business decisions, but fundamentally those business decisions are things that will take place in the next quarter or the next year. And I've always been very keen. I've never really thought that that was the case, and I've always been very keen to showcase that digital analytics isn't a cost center. It's not a secondary or tertiary revenue generation function. It's a direct revenue generation function, and the way that you do that is by taking data that you collect and activating against that data, and not activating against that data by looking at a report and then taking a decision that gets activated 5 months later, but in milliseconds, taking a piece of data that feeds into an automated system that you've built. The automated system might have taken you months to build, but the actual cogs, when you pump the fuel into it, spits an output within milliseconds, within half an hour, within a day, that activates that data so that that data point and the collection of that data point in the analysis that goes on that data point has a revenue value that you can then report back to the business. And then since joining Loop Horizon 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, it's been taking that attitude and trying to give that to our clients, basically, because I come from client side into agency side. So Loop Horizon's my first time working for an agency, and so it was to take those things that we've been trying to do for our company and actually, give them to other clients and help them turn their digital analytics into a revenue generating function. And then, in terms of the technical side of it, Andrew mentioned around data collection, but also data layers, data architecture, and making sure that data is generated in a sensible and efficient way. So it's not just collecting and using the data, but the way that the data is generated and piped in the first place is done in an automated and consistent fashion. So, like a data layer would collate data from multiple backends. So let's say you've got a CRM, you've got a product management system, an order management system, and you need APIs into your content management system to all of those backend systems. Bring that data together in an automated way and then have logic that pulls that together into a format that then renders that out to the web or website or the app or the IoT device that you're running the platform on, so that data is consistent and repeatable. Because Because if it isn't, you're not going to be able to use it to generate revenue, which is what you want to do further down the line. So
Yeah.
that's where I sit.
And something I maybe didn't mention early on, I know you work with the Adobe Analytics Suite. Do you work with the Omniture tools like the Site Catalyst and
The old ones.
Ooh,
the other?
I want to handle this one. So at Sky, I absolutely loved it. There was a developer who came up to me and go, "So Andrew, what's the difference between Omniture, Site Catalyst, and Adobe Analytics?" And I mentioned to them, well, actually, they're all the same thing.
Right.
Omniture was the company that had a tool called Site
Uh-huh.
Catalyst, which Adobe then bought out and transformed it into Adobe Analytics.
Got it.
So it's absolutely one of the things that I believe Adobe themselves are putting themselves in this box, because whenever you look at their links, they still sometimes refer to as Omniture and SC for Site Catalyst. So
Yeah.
they're not doing themselves any favor by keeping some of the old architecture there.
Well, it was a really good one.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason I asked is my first job in college was with Omniture. And, I was an intern. And so I was mostly like running the copy machine. But it was a really cool environment. And I moved on before it became Adobe. But yeah, that's my pedigree.
Well, to keep it a little light, I have to ask a question.
Sure.
And this is going to date you a little. When it was Omniture,
Yeah.
do you know what H code it was on?
No, I don't.
Nope.
Unfortunately, I don't. But
All right. So at those times, everything was H code. So if you think about like iOS, it's always iOS 16, iOS 17, iOS 18. And they did the same thing. It was H12, H13, H14, H15. And H15 was the cutoff from moving it from Omniture to Adobe Analytics.
I see. Okay. Well, let's see. If I think really hard, maybe by the end of our conversation, I can remember, because they would always make a big announcement whenever they moved up. So yeah, let me come back to that. Right. So now you work with large enterprises, but so maybe some of this is a little bit speculative, and a lot of my clients and a lot of the audience for this podcast are small and medium-sized businesses, which I think are very young or less mature in their use of analytics for the web. If you were starting your own small business, what are the first 3 metrics that you'd recommend that a business start tracking for web activity, web traffic, revenue generation, and what would those be?
I think it depends on the type of business. Are we talking about e-commerce businesses, or are we talking about businesses that maybe just generate like visibility and brand awareness online, and actually conversion takes place maybe in the shop? Or so like what kind of businesses are we talking here?
I'm thinking, say like a service business. So like either a building contractor, for example, or they deliver interior design services. So it's mainly awareness. The site primarily drives people to reach out to get a consult and do pricing, for instance, rather than pure e-commerce or product sales on the website.
So I would think that the key dimensions and metrics that you would want would be volume of visitors on the site, which you're going to get just from deploying an analytics tool with basically no additional config. So that's nice and easy to achieve. Dimension-wise, I'd be looking at your inbound traffic so that you're understanding where it's coming from. Because if you're a small to medium-sized business, you probably don't have a massive marketing budget, so you'll be relying a lot on organic reach and understanding where those users are coming in from. And trying to understand, I guess nowadays as well, understanding what's AI traffic versus what's actual genuine user traffic. So what's crawling to spit a result out in the AI response to the search rather than actually putting a user on the side. So trying to get a feel for that. And then if you've got an online form through, what are the relatively cheap integrations with a CRM for lead gen, and the ability to tie the lead to the landing on the site and to the data source so that you're getting an understanding of whatever marketing activity and word of mouth traffic you're generating, how successful is that being? Um, and then, if you do have a form on site, you're understanding which of those traffic sources beyond driving volume. You might drive a load of volume, but it might not convert. So it might be the wrong audience, for example.
Mhm.
So that's going to help you understand if those data sources are, well, if your activity is driving volume and if the volume that is being driven is the correct audience for your product, by collecting the lead. And that's relatively easy to do for free or relatively cheap.
So using the Google Suite, for instance, probably get them everything they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to what extent do you think, so somebody that doesn't have a background either in data statistics or um, like technology, like develop computer science, to what degree do you think these skills around analytics can be gained? And is there a cutoff to where they should hire an expert, a consultant to do the heavy lifting for them? How would you counsel a small business entrepreneur to think through that?
I would definitely say start with the free suite and try and do it yourself. The barrier to entry for getting Google Tag Manager and GA4 onto a WordPress site is very minimal. Like, watch a couple of YouTube videos and you'll figure it out. And if you've built your own WordPress site, I should say, then you've already got the skill sets to go and do. And if you've got somebody else to build your WordPress site for you, then lean into them and say, well, how would I get an analytics tool on? Because in terms of what we're doing, probably to begin with, for the kind of basic metrics, you don't really need to pay somebody like us to do it for you, or your web developer might be able to do it for you. It might be worth just getting like a small consult from somebody, because web developers aren't analytics implementation specialists, and it is possible to get it wrong. And if you've got like a Shopify integration, then that's where things start to become a little bit more complicated, and maybe you do need some sort of support or just a consultation to check if you've done it right. But certainly for like really basics, just landing people on your site, getting volume, understanding if they've clicked on a particular button to send a form submission, should be relatively easy to achieve, depending how you've integrated the form in your website, of course. Like, if it's in an iframe, then that might cause you some problems. But
Sure.
so I think that, yeah, I mean, I would certainly have a go at it first. And when I've been setting up my own websites, obviously I work in this space, but I've always just done it myself, as you would, where it would be worth putting in some time to learn beyond watching videos about implementation is how you do marketing tracking, because so many businesses get that wrong. Large businesses get that wrong, and it's really, there's no excuse. There's so much documentation about how you do, like, if you've got GA4, how you do marketing tracking setup for the basic marketing channel implementation for GA4 is all there and available. And that'll get you quite a long way, and then you can decide if you need more data. But get yourself to that first position where data's coming in, and you can start to do some reports, and you feel like you're understanding them, before spending a lot of money on it.
Yeah.
I was gonna say definitely around the marketing channel. That's where most people will get wrong, especially considering that's one of the first times you're really going to have more control over what the values are going in. So you want to make sure that it's consistent. You're going to want to have that strategy of like, how do you want to set up each of the different parameters to ensure that you have that consistency and you're not having email with a lowercase e and email with a capital E. And that's just going to throw off your data.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. So jumping into what you're doing, what are some of the more complex things, or as an organization evolves, what are some of the more complex kinds of analytics that you're dealing with? You're starting to use some of these enterprise systems and multiple systems to combine and synthesize data. What kinds of like high level metrics are some of these larger enterprises really targeting? And I know that's a very broad question because you're all over the place, but what's like something organization can aspire to?
I think I mean, and again, we're in the implementation space, so I don't want
Mhm.
to
Sure.
pretend that I'm an absolute expert with analysis, although I have done analysis over the years, and I know you have too, Andrew, of course. It tends to reflect the complexity of the business. And in some cases, I would argue that businesses, well, I definitely argue, strongly argue actually, that businesses overcomplicate things unnecessarily. A lot of the time, a lot of what we're doing is actually trying to simplify what somebody else has implemented because it doesn't make any sense. And you
Mhm.
end up getting to the point where your core metrics, there's so much, like, there's all this assumption of collect everything. And actually, if you collect everything, you lose sight of the important things because you haven't defined them. So actually, a lot of what we do with larger businesses is you might come into an implementation that has 200 separate dimensions
Oh,
and
wow.
100 variables and 100 metrics, I should say. And a lot of what we might do is come and talk to that business, speak to the people at the top and say, well, what are your primary KPIs? What is it that actually drives value for your business? Because those are the things you want to monitor and you want to make sure that they're being collected and aren't being muddied or impacted by other things. Then at a lower level, you might interview people who are using the data as it stands today and say, well, which of these bits of data drives value? So let's try and put a cash value on these data points. And then we'll prioritize them and decide which ones to keep. Um, Now, I know that doesn't really answer your question, but that's the sort of thing we're looking at. It's because it's very easy to overcomplicate things. Um, the complexity should follow the complexity of your business. So if you're working with like an online retailer, for example, you would go beyond just views and marketing and lead generation and you start looking at product information. What products have been shown to a user? What products have been added? What products have been removed? How many products were added to a basket? Were they then in the checkout? And then you would say, okay, well, how much revenue was assigned to that product? And if I dropped out of the basket, how much was the basket worth that got abandoned? And then once you know that a basket's been abandoned, then how might I recontact that person who's abandoned the basket? And then you start to get into user identifiers. So now we've got cookie-based usage. We've got product information that's coming from a product back-end system serving to the website. We've got revenue, and now we've got user identifiers that we might want to use for a basket abandonment program. And so you can see it quickly grows, but it should
Yeah.
grow with the complexity of the business rather than just let's collect everything from day one. That tends to muddy the water and you lose sight of what's actually important.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I saw your Andrew. I saw your hand. I thought you were like raising your hand. Feel free to chime in.
No, I was muting and
Yeah, no
unmuting.
worries.
But I was just going to give one quick metaphor, and I know it's going to sound really bad just from a environmentalist point of view, but if you think about if you're trying to see the horizon through a forest, all your different variables and all your different metrics are just adding more trees. So the more that you have on, the harder it is to see the horizon and see what you're actually trying to aim for.
Oh, interesting. Well, simplification, that sounds like a common theme, and getting and tying it to revenue and the return on investment, and of course, and that I think that's a good principle that applies to just about any business. Um, Now, let me ask you a little bit about the current environment and what you're looking forward to. Are there certain processes or approaches in web analytics that are exciting to you, like whether it's opportunities that AI presents, or do you have access to more real-time analytics that allow businesses to react more quickly than in the past? What's exciting that's ahead in data analytics?
And Andrew, do you want to? Because I feel like I've been talking a lot.
No, I was going to say this one is actually quite interesting because the two main things I've been looking at, the new features that Adobe's bringing. They just did a Adobe Summit here in London where everything was talking around AI. So how can you use AI from an analyst point of view to be able to get better understanding out of the reports by using natural search language? Or how can you use AI to be able to connect more with your audiences using, I think it's LLM that they described it as. The other one that I think I'm more interested in will be around, over in Europe, we have the GDPR.
Yeah.
And as we know, we had Brexit. Now they're looking at how do we take the GDPR and make it a little bit more focused and a lot more business friendly. So that finally got passed through quite recently. There should be more of a guidance come wintertime to understand what does this actually mean to businesses. So it's going to be focusing on that and how can we take these new regulations and help companies to ensure that they're meeting their governance requirements.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've got a whole bunch of things. I don't know how long we
Yeah.
want to
No,
spend.
we've got time. Yeah.
Um, really big things for me. I mean, and I'll probably will touch on AI at some point, but um, there's the whole rollout to server side, which has been going on for a few years now. So that's trying to remove script from user devices, from the browser, for example, and to take that orchestration server side. So instead of having a Facebook pixel and a GA4 pixel and a Google Ads pixel and Floodlight, etc., you would have one collection script that would then hit the server side endpoint and distribute to all of those vendors from a server that you own. The barrier to entry for that is becoming less and less, and it's getting much easier to get into. That's been going on for a while, but it's still exciting and it's still picking up speed. It hasn't slowed down. And then the benefits that brings, it sort of feeds into the GDPR and e-privacy in Europe, the California legislation, and I don't know that that's getting adopted more widely. But actually, Safari and Apple in particular and their privacy features. So there's been a lot of stuff going on with Safari Intelligent Tracking Prevention, which
Mm.
basically takes all of your first party cookies and cuts off how long they last for. So I'm mentioning earlier about, you deploy GA4, you can tie your marketing to a lead. Well, not if that lead takes place next day, because then the cookies disappeared and you can't tie the marketing to the lead anymore because the mechanism of joining those two things together has been deleted if the user was on Safari. And 50% of users are, basically. So server side offers some mitigations for that, insofar as you can set cookies in a different way to allow, and this is the kind of stuff, it feeds back into your previous question about the kind of things we're talking to clients about. SMEs, small to medium enterprises, don't necessarily need to look at server side, although, as I say, the barrier to entry is becoming less and less. So they might want to look at something like a Stape IO or an Addingwell, or one of those vendors that will do the server side implementation for you at a relatively small cost, volume based cost, usage cost. And then you start to get cookie persistence back and you get some of that back. So that's all very exciting at the moment. Obviously, identity resolution, collecting user identifiers, with consent, very important in Europe and becoming very important in the US, but becoming even more important with legislative changes. So identity resolution and collecting hashed user identifiers for things like Metacapy. So that's the conversion API and sending user identifiers to allow better conversion attribution. You've got user provided data in GA4, which is basically the same thing, but will also allow you to connect to Google's database and bring in demographics and interest data, probably very relevant to some of your clients, because you can then create audiences off that have visited your site and access Google's database to understand more about them. So, are they interested in sports? Do they like are they male or female? Basic age ranges, things like that. So that's all available. You can also do that through the names slip my mind, but there's another way of doing it through third-party cookies, but that's becoming less and less reliable because third-party cookies are basically deprecated now. So using user-provided data in GA4, and then the equivalent for Google Ads is enhanced conversions, and again, it's just sending in these user identifiers. So identity resolution is becoming more and more accessible for free or very cheap. Server-side tagging is becoming more and more accessible free or very cheap, which gets your cookie persistence back up. And then the other big thing that I've found very interesting lately is these tagless solutions.
Hmm.
So essentially, I mentioned about trying to audit analytics implementations and apply a value to all of the data collected. And part of the reason why you do that is because data collection has a cost. You've
Hmm.
got the people who set it up and maintain it, but you've got your development team for making the data available in a consistent way. So, every time you add more data, there's a business cost to creating it and maintaining it. Um, you can slow the website down if you don't do it in the right way. You can even break the website. So there's potentially a user experience cost and an ultimate revenue cost. So there's an efficiency and a revenue cost for adding data. So that's why you try to add a value to each data point, because each data point has an impact as well. Um, Tagless solutions, on the other hand, purport to be to not you don't have to worry about that anymore. And so what they do is you put the tagless solution in, and it scrapes the whole site and pulls all of the information in. And so then instead of you having to set up a complex data layer with your development team and have all the overheads of having that implemented, you just collect everything, and then your analysts can go in and define, pull out the bits that they want, and the bits that have meaning for them, and do the orchestration after the data is being collected, which also means it can be retrospective because you can change that data orchestration and apply it backwards. So that's really interesting. That's quite new. That's takes the whole model of data collection and who owns it. Because I always say, like, a data layer and data collection is a division of labor.
Right.
Somebody has to do these data transformations. You've got the data coming from the back end product management system and the CRM and the headless content repository and the content management system. And somebody has to manage the 50,000 data transformations that need to take place to make that intelligible. So who's going to do it? And historically, it's always been your development team would do it because there's lots of them.
Right.
Um, they're not data experts and they're not benchmarked on data quality. They're benchmarked on speed of delivery. And so, actually, are you going to get the best quality of data by using that traditional model to collate all of your data up front and make sure it's consistent? Or does it make more sense to scrape absolutely everything and then let your analysts, who are data experts and who are benchmarked on data quality and reporting quality, figure it all out after it's been collected? So I'm really interested in seeing how that plays out. And I promised I'd mention AI.
Yeah, actually, I have a follow up. Where you go here?
Um, in that scenario where you've pulled everything in, large language models, large language, are very good at receiving vast amounts of information and trying to make sense of it. And so I think where this is going to be really interesting is if the industry does go in the direction of collect everything and figure it out later, what role AI plays in that, and then who has oversight of it, because it still needs some sort of oversight from somebody who knows what they're doing to understand if the AI is talking crap.
Sure. Right. Right.
But those are the things that are kind of interesting and exciting for me at the moment.
No, that's a lot. And I mean, it gives me a lot to think about. I'm curious if in the circles you run in, if you've heard any on the horizon, if there's going to be any access to analytics around the way people are using LLMs. Like, I know that a lot of web search has been siphoned off because people are answering their questions on ChatGPT or others that are functioning as the intermediary where Google search used to fill. So, right now, I don't believe that's accessible at all. But have you heard of any? I mean, can we try to exert pressure to get that data, or is that on the horizon?
It would be nice. No, I haven't heard about that being opened up, unfortunately. I don't know if you have, Andrew.
No, that was one of the questions that several analysts were asking Adobe as well at the Adobe Summit. So, trying to understand, is there any way of being able to capture this? Because it's really hard whenever it's a bot going on and scraping it off, because their sites have always been designed to ignore the bots, especially because the very first bot that was very successful became Google search.
Right. Yeah. No, excellent point. I find this really fascinating, and obviously it's a big time for change in the technology space, and just interesting to see how things are playing out. I could probably talk to you for hours, and I'm impressed with you both as podcasters and as data guys. So why don't we put a pin in it for today? Now, if people would like to hear more about you, tune into your podcast, network, where can they reach you? And maybe we can start with Andrew and then Matt.
Well, to be able to listen to our podcast, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on YouTube. You just have to look up Digital After Dark. On there are two different podcasts. So there's the actual Digital After Dark, which was the thing that started all off, and that was between Matt and I. So anytime Matt is on a podcast with me, it automatically becomes a Digital After Dark. The second one is Andrew Talks, and this is one where it's just me or me and someone else, and that is one where I'm trying to really get off the ground because, as you hear, Matt's very busy. He can't dedicate as much time, and I want to become a better podcaster. And the only way to become a better podcaster is by going out there and doing it. So that's why I decided to start a second one. But since I already had the integration set up for Digital After Dark, I was like, no, I'm not going to do that again. But reaching out, I try to keep things a little bit more privacy, so
Fair enough.
not very easy to reach out besides just the podcast.
Digital After Dark.
You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn handle is just Matt Does Data, all one word. So you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. And I think we learned a lot. I'm sure for a lot of the solopreneurs and entrepreneurs in the audience, they are going to be thinking about this and trying to implement, aspiring to have better data and turn their marketing and web efforts into dollars. So thank you so much.
No worries. And
Yeah.
I mean, if any of them want to reach out, because there's so much stuff. I mean, we kind of touched on some of the free tools, but I haven't even talked about BigQuery yet and getting the data out of GA4 and all of that stuff. So if anyone wants to reach out on LinkedIn, I'm more than happy to have a chat.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Reed.
Want to stay ahead of what's actually working in marketing right now? Head over to MarketSurge.io and see how we're helping businesses grow smarter, faster, and louder. That's MarketSurge.io, because your next breakthrough shouldn't be a guess.